Welcome to the Deck 4 podcast. You can access episodes, companion articles, research notes and links, as well as information about our contributors and supporters at deck4podcast.com. Hope you enjoy the program.
In this section, Frank talks about his love of cinema and early in his career doing some extra work on feature films.
As a child, of course, I was an avid cinema goer, as people were in my day. I used to go to the pictures any time I could. Loved the films of Errol Flynn and so on as a small boy, and then got a bit more sophisticated, got into Greer Garson and Betty Davis and the great Hollywood weepies. But of course, as an actor, film at that time was my goal. I really wanted to become a film actor. And so I decided one of the things I ought to do was to learn a bit about what it was like to be in a film studio. And in those days, they were making a lot of big Hollywood epics and so on. And so I decided to do some film extra work. And it was quite extraordinary, really. I mean, most marvellous set of people, a real cross-section of everybody from old Etonians to people who'd just been let out of prison, I think. I mean, a whole lot. And it was a fascinating group of people, a wonderful group of people. I can remember working on Ivanhoe, which was one of the great epics at that time. And for some days I was defending the castle, other days I was attacking the castle in a different uniform. I remember I had to fire a bow and arrow at the castle. It was an enormous crowd scene, so unfortunately it didn't really show, because all my arrow would ever do is just go into the row in front. And then when we were defending the castle, I mean, the arrows were coming, and the director said, well, now, as the arrows come, some of you will fall down dead. Well, an old hand among the extras said to me, the thing is, fall down dead at the beginning, you can spend the rest of the day just lying around on the ground. So I did, and as everybody else did. So he kept saying, no, some of you got to stay alive. Come on, come on. And so eventually we were told who could die and who wasn't to die. But it was a fascinating thing. And I did extra work on a lot of films. And then I gradually realised that if you were going to be a film extra, you were liable to remain a film extra. So I decided, sadly, that I had to give that up. And I think the thing that actually made me see this was when I was actually featured as an extra in The Life of Gilbert and Sullivan with Robert Morley and Maurice Evans, I think. And I played one of 6 angry men who walk out of Sir Arthur Sullivan's study because they're furious that he's writing all these comic operas instead of his oratorio. And you can actually identify me in that film. And I thought, well, now the time has come to give up being a film extra if you want to be a proper actor on film. Of course, I did eventually get into films properly as a proper actor.
And in this section, Frank talks about some of his earliest television work.
Because there was only the BBC in those days. I mean, there were no rivals to just the one channel. And they always wrote back and say, we do have an auditioning process here at the BBC. So I dutifully went and did the audition. Not that I thought it would ever do me any good, because I don't think it ever did. But at least then I could write and say when I wrote, I have already done the auditioning thing, so they couldn't palm me off with that. Eventually my letters paid off, and I did, my very first one was a drama documentary about young people going through their first 6 weeks of national service. And I played the sort of country bumpkin who got absolutely everything wrong. And I was the total despair of the drill sergeant from Aldershot, who was brought down to drill us. He kept saying, you're a horrible little man, Williams. And I kept saying, I meant to get it wrong, I meant to get it wrong. So that was my defence. I suppose then I played a succession of things. I was in, I can't quite remember how the order of this happened, but I know over my career I was in Z-Cars, No Hiding Place, Emergency Ward 10. Emergency Ward 10 was interesting. I hovered between life and death in Emergency Ward 10 for 6 weeks. Very different from from Holby City and Casualty, where they show you every close-up of a wound and an operation. I sat at home, although it was live television, going out live, I sat at home and watched my own operation, Because in those days, you didn't see the patient being operated on, just saw the doctors looking down saying, oh yes, I think he'll pull through, and all that sort of thing. So I sat at home and watched my own operation. Immediately after the Army game, I did a play for one of the great television directors for whom I'd worked quite a lot before the Army game, Rudolph Cartier, and I did Anna Karenina with very starry cast, actually. The young Sean Connery before he became 007, and Claire Bloom. So that was great. And I do, one of the things I remember, this is how primitive television was in those days. I had to dance with Claire Bloom. It was a ballroom scene. And I had a line to her, like a dream you float, dear lady. I had to say. And I remember Rudolph Cartier saying, now, Frank, you must get under the chandelier when you say that line, because that's where the microphone is hidden. So that's how primitive it was.
In this section, Frank recalls his first episode of Dad's Army.
It was called The Armoured Might of Corporal Jones. And it had a lot of interesting things about it, that episode. It was the first episode of the third series. It was the first appearance of Pamela Cundell as Mrs. Fox. It was the first episode in which Jones's van appeared as the platoon armoured vehicle, as it were. And at the end, there is a very nice little cameo from a young actor, very well known now, but not really well known then, called Nigel Hawthorne. So it's really quite an important episode, quite apart from the fact that it was my first one.
In 1971, Frank starred in the Dad's Army feature film, and here are some memories about that production.
And of course, we didn't only do Dad's Army on television, we did a feature film where actually Chalfont St Giles stood in for Warmington-on-Sea, whereas in the television series it had always been in Norfolk, but Chalfont St Giles was Warmington-on-Sea. And I remember the very first day I was on location filming there, a car picked me up and took me to Chalfont St Giles. I got there tremendously early, and so I thought, well, I'll have a wander around the village. And I'm wandering around and thinking, oh, well, yes, this is a very well-chosen location. It hasn't changed since the war. Look at those advertisements in the shop windows, and oh my goodness, there's an advertisement from Craven A, which I remember from wartime. And then it suddenly, when I saw in the middle of this very inland town a little notice saying "to the sea" with an upturned rowing boat, that in point of fact, of course, it had all been got ready for the film anyway. But, I mean, it was a fascinating piece of nostalgia, that, watching the old walls stop me and buy one ice cream tricycle coming down, and sort of thinking, gosh, I remember that when I was a boy and all that. So it was fascinating. Of course, when we were there, somebody had to go round and take down all the television aerials that might get into shot, because, of course, they wouldn't be right for the wartime. And then I think he used to go round and put them up every evening. So presumably they could watch Dad's Army on television when they came home.
Between 1975 and 76, Frank starred in the Dad's Army stage show, and here are some memories of his year on that production.
Of course, one of the highlights of doing the stage show was that we actually got to appear in the Royal Variety performance that year. We had a sequence in it where they sang the Floral Dance, quite well known. I think it's on some of the DVDs and things like that, but it was a wonderful sequence, and we did that at the Royal Variety. It was a wonderful lineup. I can remember Vera Lynn and Harry Steacombe. A whole lot of people, KwaZulu dancers, I remember, yeah, and it was a great night. And of course, at the end, bonus, we were presented to the Queen, which was a great honour.
Podcast terms and conditions can be found at our website, deck4podcast.com. You can contact us there or on our social media. Find us on the major podcasting platforms, and we're also on Substack, Facebook, Tumblr and Instagram. This has been George Fairbrother. Thanks for listening.